controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a sub-science here to make things make sense.
Hello, Dr. Esther.
Hi, guys.
Welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. Thank you for having me.
So where are you right now? You have a British accent, just somewhere in Britain.
Born and raised in London, in the UK.
How's Greg's British accent?
How's my British accent there, Dr. Esther?
Every American I come across that does a British accent, they always try to sound like Oliver Twist or something. Like, I don't understand.
Please, sir, I want some more. So where are you in London? Because I actually taught in science in the UK for 1 year in Folkestone.
In where?
Folkestone?
Folks, yeah, I haven't come up. To be honest, Londoners, we don't tend to really go outside of London. So, yeah, I have no clue where that is.
Okay, so where are you, though, within London?
So I was in London, but basically I transitioned into the pharmaceutical industry, and the particular site is just outside London called in an area called Stevenage. So I decided to move there. So I'm literally like just outside London.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So
I was going to say, just for a bit of context for people who are listening,
yeah,
why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we can jump into chatting about that.
Okay, so born and raised Londoner. I am a biochemist turned neurobiologist turned antibody engineer.
What?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. We need to get into this. Okay. So my first question, though, was like, when did you fall in love with science? Like, do you have a specific moment, or just like, we're always curious what that is for people?
Do you know what? I was always curious, but I've been asked that question before. And I think the time when from what I can remember, that science really resonated with me and sort of gave me that wow factor was so during school, I think I was like 9 years old or something, 9 or 10, and we had a lesson where they were teaching us the different characteristics that make something a living thing, and that just fascinated me. So we had the acronym Mrs. Nerg. And that was basically like all the characteristics that would make something a living thing. So it was, if I can remember, movement, respiration, sensitivity, nutrition, excretion, reproduction, and growth.
Whoa, I've never heard that before. That's such a good acronym. I remember one time in university, somebody brought up, okay, does that mean a mule, or what's the cross between a donkey and a horse? Do we remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, you mean the fact that it can't reproduce?
Yeah, it can't reproduce. So it was like, is that not living? Because some cross-species animals. And then the professor was like, oh.
Well, okay. But it can excrete.
Yeah.
But that's kind of interesting, because that's like, I find that fascinating too. Like a lot of biology textbooks start with that. They're like, so what is life? I do British accent. Oh my God, sorry. I'm like dragging your country. But did you find, because I think that's like a profound thing as a 9-year-old to kind of think about, like, did you actually contemplate in that moment, like, wait, I'm alive, that's not living? Or was it just like what made that so important to you? Because it's kind of like...
Do you know what? So I was kind of like a really weird kid in that, like, during like the school playtime, I would kind of go to the playground, and instead of playing with my friends, I'd like sit down and like find some snails to just play with. And so I've always been like fascinated with like things that are different to me and that can do different things and have like weird stuff coming out of their bodies, apparently. So from then, like, I've always been curious about different animals. And so, when I could kind of understand that, there were all of these different characteristics that made living things that look so different, that act so differently to each other, like that, those were the characteristics that brought them all together. I think for me, that was just mind-blowing, honestly.
So I have something to think about, because this is something Neil deGrasse Tyson has said, and for some reason I'm like, I don't believe it, but he says that salt is the only thing that we eat that's never been alive. And I don't know why, but I'm just like, that can't be. But I think about it all the time, and I haven't been able to figure out that that's not necessarily true. So that's just something for you to think about, because
that makes sense.
It's fast. It's like the only rock
Yeah,
eat?
because even I mean, I presume we like eat other minerals and stuff, but maybe they're all coming from sources that were
Exactly.
living at one point.
Like they're coming from leaves or from something that have been living. And then I think about how water sometimes fortified with minerals, but that's drinking. So anyways, I'm not here to question Neil deGrasse Tyson, but it's one of those things that also it reminds me of like so fascinating about science. It's like everything we eat was alive at some point. Like
Yeah, it's crazy. Like even when I'm not sure if you guys are aware of Brian Cox, but he's quite like a really popular sort of science communicator here in the UK. And, you know, I remember when I was sort of in like secondary school, I'd always make sure to watch his shows. And it's not that like, you know, for me, I never sort of had the idea of, you know, one day I'm going to go to space and, you know, I'm going to go into like astrophysics or anything. It wasn't that. It was like just hearing him just say things like, you know, the things that stars are made of are the things that we're made of too. And just like thinking like, oh, I am a star.
yeah. Oh my God. I literally have shivers. It's true.
That was my conclusion from everything. I am a star.
You are. It's like it's philosophical. It's like spiritual. Like I think that is. I mean, even for me, like when I first fell in love with science was when I was kind of like in class, like, is this not like the answer? And like, is this not spirituality? Like, yeah. So you were in. So when did you? I'm curious about all those things you said earlier. I can't even rename them. They were such big words.
Biochemists.
Yeah.
Into the pharmaceutical world. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Like, so what did you get your bachelor's degree in?
So my bachelor's degree was in biochemistry.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess with that, there was no, I didn't really think much into it. I kind of just during like when I got my college results, I just thought, I really liked biology. I really liked chemistry. So
it truly is so fascinating. Like my biochem classes were some of my favorite. Even for people listening who are choosing to go into university courses, like I definitely would recommend because I think it is such a good clash of biology you can really relate to physically because it's like your own body, and then being able to get into the microscopic of that and how it is just mind-blowing when you see it on the page.
And you get to learn about yourself. You're like, oh, that's why I get nervous. Oh, that's why I get drunk. Like, it's so much more personal sometimes than maybe other forms of like biology. So biochemistry is what you major your bachelor's in. And then you go to neurobiology. Yeah.
So what was really good about my biochemistry course was that, because, you know, biochemistry, it's basically linked to lots of other different areas in science. So, you know, we then had a neurobiology course within our biochemistry course. And those series of lectures was kind of, you know, focused around, you know, the sort of structures of different like neuropeptides and different like neural receptors and whatnot. And, you know, for me, that's what I found most interesting during my biochemistry course. And so, when in our third year of our course, we could either do like a literature review or we could do a research project. And so I thought, you know what, out of all of the courses or lectures that I had during my course, the neurobiology one was the one that struck me most. So, you know, let me see if I can get a research project with the professor that was teaching teaching those series of lectures. And yeah, luckily I was able to get a research project with him, and that actually formed the basis to my actual PhD. So I actually did my PhD with the same supervisor as well.
Okay, so now we get to ask you, what was your PhD in for layman's terms? Because I read about it and I was like, what?
So I always say that my PhD was on the love hormone in starfish. That's like the layman's term that I would use. So essentially, in our lab group, so we were all working on starfish, but each person had their own, what we call like neuropeptide system that they were working on. So, you know, neuropeptides are sort of small or polypeptides or small proteins that can be produced and released in the nervous system, but they can act both as neurotransmitters, so like locally between different like neurons and nerves, but they can also like travel through the body to other tissues and other organs. So they kind of act as both like a neurotransmitter and a hormone, basically.
Do they do that
And
in
so-
humans as well as starfish? Both.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I know.
Yeah.
Kidding.
So and the like different neuropeptide systems are evolutionarily ancient. So neuropeptide families that you would find in humans, you find very similar peptides in starfish and in worms and in different
Snails.
yes, all of them. Yeah. So so everyone was working on their own system. I was working on the vasopressin oxytocin system. So you've probably heard of oxytocin because that's like, the love hormone, the hormone that gets released when you hug people and whatnot. So I was working on that system and basically trying to, first of all, identify the neuropeptide in starfish, try to find out where it's found within the anatomy of the starfish, and then what its roles are in the starfish as well. So that sort of there were other parts of my PhD, but that was probably the main part of my PhD.
Are there many starfish near the UK?
Yeah, so we have what we call the common European starfish, so Asterias rubens. That was the starfish species that we were working on. But so that's like the most common one. We could literally just like go down to the seaside and just like wade through the coast and collect like 50, 100 starfish.
Wow.
And did you? So you would actually go out into the coast? Like part of your work was to be out.
Yeah, we like, get waders on, like trudge with our like buckets.
Oh my gosh, I miss that so much. Like I love the idea of being able to study stuff in school, but also being able to be outdoors. Like having that nice mix. Like was that part of something that drew you to that, to not be necessarily just locked up in a lab or in a lecture hall, but to actually be experiencing with your hands as well?
So honestly, like I liked being in the lab. For me, like being in the lab was a deal breaker. I had to be in the lab. But when it came to the like model organism that I would be using for my experiments, again, I had a hard and fast rule, which was it can't be an animal that can bite me. So literally, that was literally my rule. So because I did like a summer placement between my second and third year of my bachelor's degree, and that was in like a Department of Investigative Medicine, and there they use lots of rodents to do different experiments, and so I had to work with mice and rats, and literally I'd spend like an hour in the room with them and I'd come out and I'd be sweating. I'd just be like, I'm not comfortable in this. And I got bitten so many times and I was like, I just can't deal with this for like 4 years of my life. So give me an animal that doesn't bite, that like doesn't fly, that doesn't move really fast, and I'm good.
That's a starfish is a model organism for you.
That's so true.
They are literally my babies.
So
Like,
when you're studying their neuropeptides, is it to find the nuanced differences in how those peptides function in a starfish compared to humans, or just generally like what is the exact function in this species of starfish?
So it was for a number of reasons. Definitely we were focused around the, like, as you said, the comparison, because that would give us some understanding of how these neuropeptide systems have evolved over time. So if we look at the animal kingdom, they can be like separated into I guess, branches. And so you have sort of like humans and other kind of like chordates or whatnot. And then kind of a bit further down from that, you have starfish. And then a bit further down from that, that's where you have, the worms and, spiders and all of those animals. And like currently with the research that's out there about particularly the system that I work with, there's a lot of information about, vasopressin and oxytocin in humans. There's lots of information about this system in worms, but there's this bit in between with where starfish are, and we don't really know much about their nervous system, how it functions, their physiology. So, this is all kind of new territory, and it's kind of a way to bridge the gap where, we can kind of contribute knowledge there. So that was kind of one of the main reasons for studying that.
That is so cool.
Yeah, like when you're doing science like that, where there isn't information until you figure it out, kind of, like, I can't even really comprehend that, because so much of what we do is just taking studies and science and then like communicating it. Like, we aren't actually ever having to deal with like, no one knows this. When you're doing the science, like, I'm curious what that feels like. Are you like, like, in my head, I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever, because it's literally like I'm contributing to something that doesn't exist yet. But B, like, how much harder is that? Like, how, like, do you go to other systems that are similar, or are you really just like looking at the data and building a narrative that's brand new? Like, I just don't know very much about what that feels like.
Yes, it's a bit of a tough one. I think in some ways it's easier because there's less information out there to actually read and consume. But it also can be very frustrating. So when you do have data, and you're trying to figure out what it means, it's really hard to do that when there's not much of the literature out there. So, you know, a lot of the times we do, for example, see if we can find similarities in related species or, you know, in closely related animals, and try to sort of form an understanding based on the data we have and what's currently out there.
And so what did you learn? Like, what does that pathway do for starfish?
So, you know, the saying, you know, the way to a man's heart is through the stomach.
Oh my God.
That is pretty much.
Okay.
The way to a starfish's heart.
Oh my gosh, wait. I have a random question about starfish then, because I remember being told or taught that starfish like eject their stomach to dissolve like the things they eat. Is that true? Did you know that?
Okay, so wait, is this connected? So like, okay,
That is connected.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay, then explain it. Just explain it, because now I'm like freaking out.
So we basically like were able to identify the starfish version of the vasopressin oxytocin peptide. We had it synthesized into like powder form. And then we basically sort of made it into a solution, injected it into starfish. And we found that this peptide, which is classically known in humans as being sort of the love hormone, triggers starfish to basically vomit their stomachs out their mouths. Yeah. So it's insane. It's actually, and like, so a lot of my like research during my PhD, like not much of it was actually like behavioral stuff, like actually working with like live starfish. But pretty much whenever I did work with starfish, 99% of the time, it was just to watch their stomach come out of their mouths and like record that basically.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, it's really potent. Like the actual neuropeptide is really potent. You need like a small amount, like a small concentration of it to cause that to happen. And they also kind of change their body posture as well. They kind of have like a humped posture, which again kind of represents this whole like feeding behavior that they have, because they kind of like hump over, like, let's say a mussel, for example, bring their stomachs out their mouths, partially digest the mussel, then like bring it in as like a soup, and then like do the further like final digestion within their bodies. And it's just really interesting to see, you know, a neuropeptide kind of show what we actually see in sort of normal physiological environment. So yeah.
That's so freaking cool. I'm kind of turned on. Is that weird? I'm kidding.
That is weird.
I'd love if a man would vomit out his stomach and eat a little bit of rock.
Wait, I have a couple of questions.
This is so
I'm so
cool,
curious about.
Esther. I'm sorry if we're just like
We're going off on
in.
this.
Okay, I'm like, this is now about starfish.
So first I'm wondering, because you said you synthesize it into a powder form. So is that fundamentally different? Like the oxytocin in a starfish or the vasopressin in a starfish, is it actually different than what is in a human?
So so the actual like functional peptide, it's like 9 what we call amino acids. So they're like the building blocks to a protein or peptide. And like this family of neuropeptides is quite highly conserved across the animal kingdom. And so classically, not in all cases, but in most cases that we know of, the vasopressin oxytocin peptides that have been found are 9 amino acids long. They pretty much all of them have a particular kind of amino acid between positions 1 and 6, which basically forms like they kind of join together and form like a ring structure, and then like the tail at the end. And that's kind of like the standard structure of this family of neuropeptides. And in terms of the actual, like the other amino acids, we do see some similarities, but there are some like important differences that we do find in starfish compared to humans. So, when we talk about amino acids, sometimes, some of them can be acidic, some of them can be basic, and this kind of determines how they, function or let's say interact with their receptors and their physiological function and whatnot. So, we do see some differences there. But in terms of, for example, the whole structure of the actual peptide, we do see like conservation across the animal kingdom there.
So if you were to put a human version of, like, could you ever do that? Just take it from human and put it in the starfish? And
or would it not fit in
would
the
you
receptor?
expect the same result, or,
So we actually did that experiment, not actually putting it in. Well,
oh my God, I'm shaking in my boots. I'm like, did they do it? Did they do it? Did I do it?
I'm trying to think of the paper. So I know we definitely. So instead of injecting the peptide into the starfish straight away, we, like, one of the main things that we tried to look at for the paper or for my project was to actually identify both the neuropeptide but also the receptor for it. And so we did experiments. So when we were able to identify what we thought was the receptor, then we had to do experiments to actually prove that this particular neuropeptide, so the starfish one, would dose dependently activate this receptor. And that would kind of be our proof that they are like, peptide receptor pairs. And so when it comes to presenting data like that, we also need to have like controls to show that, yes, this one does dose dependently activate the receptor, but this is specific to that particular peptide. So if we have related peptides like the human vasopressin or oxytocin, it's not going to also dose dependently activate the receptor as well. So we performed those experiments, and we were able to show that other related vasopressin oxytocin peptides didn't dose dependently activate like the starfish one to the starfish receptor.
So you literally did that to almost prove, though, in a control setting that it doesn't work, therefore it's different, whereas the starfish one does.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, my last question.
Oh, yeah, I know now.
Last question to nerd out about this is, how do you inject it in a starfish? Is it literally through like a needle and syringe, or is it some other mechanism?
Yeah, so we have a sort of standard needle and syringe. So like the starfish body is kind of weird in that it has like an exoskeleton. And so like when we can inject into like any of their arms or whatnot, but you kind of have to inject it on like the side of the arm to make sure that you're kind of hitting the soft tissue, because if you kind of go a bit above, then you're hitting hard. Yeah, you have like the ossicles there, and you can't really push the needles through that. So we had to, make sure that we were kind of getting it in through the sort of like softer tissue. But it is interesting because when we were kind of initially doing these experiments, we weren't really sure where to inject it. So it's kind of...
There's a bunch of starfish that you poked all over, I guess. Because we'd already like done these... like, for example, we had this like expression data that showed that this particular neuropeptide was sort of expressed in the stomach of the starfish. So we thought, maybe we kind of need to inject it closer to the stomach. But the problem there is that as you go further up the arm of the starfish to like their center where they like have their stomach, sort of on the sort of upper bit of the arm, that's where you have their gonads, which are basically like their sex organs. So okay.
Yeah.
Hot.
And and so you kind of have to make sure that you don't hit their sex organs. Because,
Famous word. Those are famous, important words to live by. Well, depends, I guess.
so like it's happened multiple times. Like, and you know, I don't hate men, but it just so happens.
No, we hate men on this podcast. We truly, I'm kidding.
man.
I say that as a joke. I said that as a joke. I said it as a man.
It so happens that you know, the sexual organs for like male starfish are very sensitive.
Yeah.
And so like if you like slightly poke it or like brush it or anything, it will just explode. And you just like you have lots of like starfish sperm like just everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
So I've literally had it where I've like injected a starfish and then I've like popped it back into the water. And then like I've taken my hand out and suddenly the water's really cloudy and I'm just like, ugh, like I can't wash my hands right now. Like I'm violated. This is terrible.
Oh my god. I love how it's like a really like intricate way of being like you jerked off a lot of starfish. But you're like, I'm not here to do this. Oh my god, Esther, that's so funny.
Did not expect this.
Yeah. Okay. Also, I'm thinking like I feel like starfish can kind of be like sort of like a basic thing that everyone has. Like, you know, like people love starfish and they'll have like starfish wallpaper and starfish tattoos. Every time you see that, you must be like, bullshit. Like you think you like starfish? I jerk them off for a living, and I don't even want to. And I've learned about their
levels here, honey. Okay.
Yes. You have no idea. Because you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they sell starfish like memorabilia.
Yeah. And you even get them like hardened. I guess they just like dry them.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Okay, we need to move on. But that was
so fascinating.
And I'm also crying. Like, that was really funny. Okay, so when did science communication become something that you cared about? Like, at what point along this journey did you even think about that?
It's actually interesting. So, like I've always been interested about communicating my science. But I think for me, it was actually when I was restricted in what I could communicate, that's when I kind of became interested in science communication. So, like in academia, you know, people are generally quite open about the research they do, you know, going to the lab, the different experiments that they're doing, you know, you can go to conferences and you can talk about the work that you do. But then when I transitioned into the pharmaceutical industry, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So, you know, because you are working on, you know, certain products that could at some point in the future become, you know, a commercial drug, for example, there are a lot of like, you know, legal restrictions in terms of what I can and can't say about the actual projects that I'm working on. So it was so basically I started in the pharmaceutical industry about 1.5 years ago. And it was at that point that I actually really kind of started to take science communication seriously, because it was at that point that I realized that I was actually limited on what I could say about the research that I do. So that kind of made me sort of make a conscious effort to, where I can, obviously not related to the work that I actually do, but where I can, communicate science, but also just like, you know, be more involved where I can in the actual science community. So, you know, I try to have a balance where, you know, yes, I will communicate science, but I also make sure to, you know, try and build a science community that is, you know, inclusive, that is open to anyone and everyone. So I've kind of been doing the two that way.
Wow, that's really interesting. So it's like, I mean, I don't even know if you can even say this, but when you join into the pharmaceutical industry, do you sign a contract that is very explicit about what you can and can't say? Or is it just like encouraged through the culture?
From what I can remember, I think it's literally just kind of like a general statement to say that things that are classed as confidential in the company, you can't make that public, basically. So whatever it is, it can be any product, any project, any equipment, whatever it is. If it's classed as confidential, then you can't speak on that basically. So even when it comes down to like, so I remember when I had my first day induction and they gave us a presentation and they kind of went through, the things that you can and can't do on site. And, they said, taking pictures or videos in the lab, like you can't do that. And for me, as someone, during my PhD, if I wanted to, I could take whatever pictures I wanted in the lab within reason. In not being able to do that, being told that I cannot do that, I was just like, oh, wow, okay. I'm definitely like restricted in what I can and can't share with people about what I do on the day-to-day basis.
Wow, that's so interesting.
So then did you start your kind of like broader science communication? Did you go to a certain platform first, or were you already kind of on like Twitter and Instagram?
And I'm curious what your favorite one is now too. So which one was first and what's your favorite now?
So I've had Twitter for like years now. Probably not nearly 10 years or something. But honestly, I never really used it until sort of like the last few months of my PhD. And it was only kind of after that. So once I'd finished my PhD and, I was now in the pharmaceutical industry, that I kind of really used Twitter more often and made sure to kind of post or communicate with people more often through there. And I kind of really, at the time, that was my only platform where like with or in the science community. So like I have my own like personal Instagram where I just like pose and that's all I do basically. And yeah, so Twitter was the only like platform that I had to communicate with scientists and about science. But because like Twitter moves really fast, so I can post something and, it can get a lot of engagement, but that all gets lost after a while and it's hard for people to find that again. And because like I really, really enjoyed the like tweets that I did where I kind of encouraged different people to, introduce themselves, what's your science about, but also what's like one cool thing about you as well. And just sort of seeing like people interact with those kind of posts and seeing people interact with each other and actually like network with each other, like under those kind of posts, I found that like really rewarding to see. And so from that, I was like, what other platforms can I use to kind of highlight different people in science, but also just like STEM as well. So like science, technology, engineering, and maths. And so I thought, I could do an Instagram page, but I think for me, like at that time, I felt like there would be lots of pressure to like create content every day for Instagram. So I thought probably the best thing to do would maybe sort of venture into videos and actually go into YouTube. And that way that could create literally like playlists that people can view and they can see, Esther's highlighted this person or whatever, that looks interesting. I'm going to have a look in that. And, these kinds of videos, they have that longevity, they're not just going to be gone in a day. You can view them as well. If they're up, you can view them a day from now, a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, hopefully. So just sort of being able to kind of create content that people can easily search for or go through. For me, that was definitely a big attraction to joining YouTube. And so I've kind of had, I started doing STEM stories. So like, researching about different like notable people in STEM. So this is from like present, but mostly from the past. I'm really talking about, their work and many of them were underrepresented either at the time or still underrepresented by our standards today in our society. So I've kind of been doing that a lot, but then I've also branched into actually doing videos on like, present day, real life, relatable scientists. So yeah, I'm kind of new to it, but just sort of seeing how that goes. But then recently I have joined Instagram with a science specific Instagram page. So, that's a lot of, again, pictures, quotes, just, different things, science life.
And you're on TikTok.
I am. I completely forgot about that. Oh my god.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So I don't know. Someone just like randomly messaged me to say, "Oh yeah, I see the videos you do on YouTube. Why don't you just do get TikTok and that's a great way to appeal to like the younger population." And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, like that would be a great thing to do. So, I mean, I am trying to like post more regularly, but it's hard like having all of these like different platforms and trying to you're present there all the time.
And
so
your job in the lab at the pharmacy. Yeah, like you,
it's truly,
you do a lot.
Social media is a full-time job when you're trying to, every different platform has a different format or style, and you don't want to just post the same things everywhere. So
and your YouTube videos are so well researched, and you're right, like a lot of them are highlighting people who are underrepresented. So there you go. It's like you have to almost put more effort into them. Like they are really well done, and they involve lots of like coordination. So it's like, yeah, no, you definitely are doing a lot, so I can understand why it's hard to post on all those platforms.
Yeah, like even now, like my daily routine is like, obviously we're in the lockdown at the moment, and so I'm working from home, but I still have like work to do. So 8:30 I get started with my like actual job as an antibody engineer. Then it's 12 p.m. lunchtime, and then that's when I grab something to eat. Open my personal laptop and then just start doing like sort of science communication stuff during that lunchtime break.
Wow.
And then it's 1 p.m. and then I kind of have to go back to my actual job that pays me until 5, get off that, have like some dinner or like just watch something on TV for a bit, and then open up my personal laptop again and like do stuff till like 10 or 11 p.m. and then go to bed and repeat the next day. And it's a lot. It's literally like having 2 full-time jobs. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Good for you. You're doing amazing. Would you want to be solely focused on the sort of science communication? If you could be, is that a direction now you're wanting to go more in, or is it kind of like, would you always want to have one foot in the sort of either the lab or working in the pharmaceutical industry? Like, do you have an opinion about that?
I would say that my passion is definitely much, being a scientist, and, I still want to, as of now, still be in the lab, still do experiments, still have a say in, what happens in, well, in my case, in the pharmaceutical industry. So for me, that's still very much important. I've kind of taken a very laid back approach when it comes to what life will throw my way, because from past experience, things have my journey in my career has not gone the way I planned at all. Like I just had like different things happen. And so for me, like whatever opportunities come my way at the time, if for me they seem like the right opportunity, then I will go for that, to be honest. So at the moment, I can't necessarily say that I will 100% until my dying day, be in the lab as a lab scientist. I can't say that. But at the moment, I really enjoy kind of the best of both worlds, and being able to do both. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I definitely, there's a big part of me that really, I worked in a lab during university, but I definitely miss that side. Even just being in academia and being fully surrounded by it, like hearing about your research on Starfish, I'm like, I'm so sad and jealous that we don't have that. I mean, obviously science communication allows you to explore so many topics, but not to the same level of depth. And that was the same thing for us. Like I was a science teacher, and this all happened. It was out of our control. We never prepared to be full-time science communicators. And then it does happen. And it is like, it's really important that you like reflect on that, and that's really cool, because I think we were so young that we didn't I talk about it all the time. I'm like, I miss interacting with humans. Like I miss like teaching. I mean, now
students.
We all do.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, when quarantine happened, we were like, welcome to our lives, everyone. But that's really cool, because I think that's a really great way to approach it. The fact that you're doing both now, and you can kind of like actually have a more balanced idea, and really thinking like, what do you want? And also take time for yourself. Because I'm like, oh my God, is that seriously your day? Like that's like really busy. But I know in quarantine, it might feel a little less like you're missing out on things, because like everyone's stuck at home, that maybe you're taking advantage of this time. But
exactly. Yeah. So when, before this lockdown, I'd limit. I mean, I try where I could to, do some of the science communication stuff during the evenings. But, there were some weekends where, I didn't want to film something for YouTube. I didn't want to spend, the whole of my weekends editing, for example. And so I would make sure to take that time to just like hang out with friends or see my family, just do stuff that made me happy. So, I'd say that at this moment in time, because obviously I do have a full-time job as well as doing this, I can't be as consistent as like other people like you guys, for example. I'd love to bring out content, every day or every week or whatever. But, there are times where I literally have to take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks off just to do me and then come back like refreshed and ready and happy to kind of, go into to do more.
That's awesome.
Communication.
That sounds like balance. That sounds like something a lot of YouTube people don't have, and then they end up crazy. Okay, I'm like, you're sounding very like a balanced, intelligent person. #science.
But I would say, yeah, take it as it comes, like you said, like when opportunities come up, you just kind of see where your life will take you, and you'll always be connected to science, even if you're not in the lab or you're not science communicating, like you'll always find your interest through learning about the world. And that's probably ultimately the thread that will carry you. And I think us as well. Like,
yeah, but we do love your YouTube channel. And we do. And I'm like, I do want a new video.
We're waiting. No, don't put pressure on her.
I'm just kidding.
You know what? Listen, sign me up, guys. Sign me up. You know what? The thing is, though, like, I feel like with YouTube, I still feel like I'm a novice. Like, even when it comes to editing, I see like the way other people edit, and I'm just like, oh my God, that looks so amazing. Like, how did you make it look so professional and stuff? And I don't know, it always kind of makes me feel a bit of a way. It's just like, if I had more time to kind of, research, how to edit in a certain way, or had like all of these like really lovely backgrounds and props and stuff. There's a sense of, I try not to compare myself to people too much, but there is that, when you do look at other people who are doing YouTube videos, you're like, I could be better.
But it takes time. And like, if you go back and look at, like, we've been doing this for 8 years. If you go back and look at our first videos, like they're like, it's just like, that's part of the process. It's sort of like art. It's like, you have to start somewhere, build out a process, and like create like a voice. And so I think like it's kind of like, even thinking that way is like a part of the process. I'm not saying like, oh, it's cool and it's good, because obviously you're saying you feel some type of way about it, but it's like, that is part of it, because you have to start somewhere, and it's like, it is really hard. And editing is about finding a voice, and like that takes like years sometimes for people. And like,
and it is also like so time consuming as well. You know what I mean? Like having to edit all on your own too, like not having, I don't know for sure, but I assume is like a whole other layer. It's like,
would like to do some editing for me.
Yeah. Honestly, people listening to this, reach out at Dr. Esther.
Please help me. But yeah, like it takes time, like just having to watch yourself over and over again, or like listen
That's the hard part too.
Over and over again. Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, you quickly get used to like your voice and stuff. Though I remember the beginning just being like, oh, I hate the way we talk.
I still hate the way I know. Oh my God.
And okay, so what's sort of next for you then, do you think? Like, obviously you said you've had a lot going on. You've been like putting out a lot of content right now online, obviously in tandem with your job. Do you think you're just going to kind of ride where it is right now, or do you have sort of like plans in your mind of what you're hoping to do next?
I don't know at the moment. I don't know. I guess I just want to just do what makes me happy. And I know that sounds so corny.
No, it's like kind of the meaning of life, hon. You figured 9 years old, you're like, what is life? I'm like, you figured it out pretty young age, playing with your snails.
That's true. But like, I think just as long as I'm happy and still passionate about putting out the content I'm putting out, then for me, that's kind of good enough. Obviously, it would be good to, just kind of see things still grow, and and just sort of see more engagement. And if that turns to
Not
monetization, I will not like
Not say no.
I will take that. But yeah, I guess just as long as when there are those long days and I'm tired, but I still have to, put content out, if I'm still happy to do that, even when I am tired and I've got lots of things going on, then for me, that's good enough. Because the worst thing is just not being passionate about something, but still having to do it just for the sake of doing it. And I think if I ever get to that point, hopefully I don't, but if I ever do, then for me, that would be a time to stop and not do it anymore. But I think as long as I kind of get engagement, and like it's really encouraging just sort of having people message me and just say, I found this so useful, or this is like, I showed this to my child or something. Like those kind of messages, they mean a lot, and they really give me that encouragement to keep going, because even if I don't think that what I'm saying is worth anything, there are people who are literally like, their lives could change based on what the content I put out. So for me, I feel like, there is that responsibility, but it's something that, I find satisfying as well.
That's what I mean. What you make is really meaningful. I think that's like something that is like more like, no, it is. It's like your YouTube channel, like that series about people underrepresented in science is like so smart, and it is so much more meaningful than so much other science content. It's actually like, when I was watching it, I was like, this is like what you don't get taught in school, but should.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're doing that like you're essentially just doing it literally like for people in many ways. Like, so like, I just think that is something that like, if that's your motivation, that's amazing. And like, that's really important. And it is going to lead to more responses like that, which if that's the driving force, that's awesome. And that will continue to like grow essentially, because it has to, right? Because like, that's exactly like how that content like functions. And it's like really cool. And I'm like, I really encourage you to keep doing it, because I've watched them all, and I constantly thought that. I was like, why am I not taught this in Canada?
I think like, as you said, you literally hit the nail on the head. Like I was thinking, what would I have wanted to know when I was growing up? And in terms of, this, like when I was taught about the scientists behind the science, it was all white middle-aged men at that time. Mm-hmm. And being able to see other people that looked like me, just diverse people, and just knowing that all of them contributed in significant ways to the science that we have today. Like that would have been something that I would have loved to have had when I was growing up. And for me, I was fortunate because, in school, I was always, when it came to teachers, they were always really supportive. They would always, they recognized something in me. And so they would always push me to do better. And even my parents as well, they would always encourage any of my interests that I had. So even though I didn't see people that looked like me in science, I knew that because of the support system I had and the encouragement I had, I could pursue whatever I wanted to pursue. But there are some people that don't have that. They don't have that support system. So for them, they need to see that representation. They need to know that there were and there are people out there that are exactly like you, who are doing amazing things that you could be doing one day. And so, I just hope that if anyone is in that position and they need that representation, that, they can see that hopefully clearly in the content that I put out.
Yeah, well, they definitely can now. And I think it's also really valuable, like with everything going on, it's like decolonizing science is something that I think it's finally really, it feels like people are really starting to have a real conversation around this. And so that content that you're making is so valuable to that. And I think that that's also what you just said is an amazing testament to amazing teachers and parents. And like teaching is just so important. And I think even your videos, it's like sometimes teachers don't have maybe like, not to give them excuses, the time or whatever to decolonize what they're teaching. But to have a resource like your YouTube channel or something where they can go and have the work done for them essentially is like, sadly sometimes what like some people need, that it's like, it could be a resource for teachers as well, which even when we make our videos is what we're always thinking. We're like, we're just hoping a teacher can find this and just put it on in their class and like sit down. Yeah. I was going to say have a smoke, but it's like, no, they shouldn't be smoking in class.
Like I've had like teachers message me and say that they've shared certain YouTube videos with their students. And these can be like, secondary school students, but even up to like in academia as well. So like they've sent it to their undergrad students or their PhD students. So for example, I did a video on Henrietta Lacks, who isn't a scientist, but there's a lot of controversy around the use of her cells and the profits that were made from using her cells, which were taken without her consent and whatnot, and the sort of scandal surrounding that. And, that was, I had like senior academics message me and say, they've sent this around to their research group because, it's important to know, like, the material that you're using, know the ethics behind that. So it's just really encouraging, like seeing that people are sharing it with others, and like that's a source of education. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that's amazing. So where can people find you on each platform?
So I actually really need to find a name that I can use like consistently.
Yeah, I love Dr. Esther. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, so because you have your separate Instagram. Sorry, you explain. I'm like, okay, I go.
So, okay, so yeah, so for my YouTube, it's Dr. Esther. Mm-hmm. For my Twitter, it's at Est Odek. So it's literally like half of my first name and my last name. For my science Instagram, it's called science.uncovered. For my TikTok, so my TikTok is, I think that's Dr. _Esther or Dr. Esther.
I bet if you type it in though, it'll come up.
Yeah, if they search the name, I'm sure, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, those are all the platforms, aren't they?
Yeah, so then so the only one that's different is that you have like a separate kind of science Instagram that is like personal. More, like when you go on it, you get more like, science information and things like that, whereas your other one is just like more of you. But you can follow both people if you want.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so my personal one is esther.phd.
Yeah, because she knows about starfish. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for educating us about starfish. Like, honestly, I don't know. I'm like, I hope people resonate with how much fun that was to hear.
Yeah,
I was
truly.
like, I loved it.
Like, can we find the research you did if we look online, like in paper or something?
So I do. Yeah. So so the research that I explained about the starfish that was published last year, I think. So so you can find that online. I'll tell you what, actually, follow my science Instagram.
Yes.
Because I will be posting a link there. I'll make sure to have like those like story highlights.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure. So the plan is hopefully some point soon to have one on my PhD or like sort of different categories, and I'll make sure to put the scientific paper in there. But also, so we did have quite a lot of engagement because a press release was put out when that paper came out. So there are some news articles which kind of explain it more in layman's terms, because I'm not sure people want to like look through like a 16-page scientific paper.
Some people might.
Some might, not many, but some.
Well,
so I'll make sure to put like those articles there as well if anyone just wants to have a look at that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
It was so nice to chat with you. We appreciate it. And everyone go check out Dr. Esther's content online. It's amazing.
And when we get out of this lockdown, we are going to come fly to the UK. Hopefully at some point.
I'm
hang out. Yeah.
Well, we'll see when the lockdown ends.
Once we get a vaccine, see you in 2023.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. You can use the hashtag #SideNotePodcast to talk to us about it, or tweet at us or tag us on Instagram. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. Bye.